Ideas. Fire away.
Well, should I start? John and I have talked about this some already, just in private conversations, but about what we can do to help each other as far as corridors into the city, right? From the highway particularly, 49th and Hit Road and St. Leon Road. And, I know that you guys have plans for stuff, but, I know that we've got stuff in the works right now to finish Woodruff out to Highway 26. So, that's gonna happen in the next couple of years. But we need to find a way to get rid of that bottleneck, I think, especially with Costco being built now and getting access to it coming in from the highway. So what are your thoughts about that?
Okay. And we can discuss.
Okay.
A
We
little
don't want to
more.
discuss it, but I'm
No, I
really
mean,
concerned
a little
about it.
more because
Yeah.
there are some plans with the state and everything.
Yeah.
On that Iona roundabout, redoing that intersection. And then the road heading up to 20.
Okay.
So those are the type of things that would be good for update type stuff.
Yeah.
But then in general, corridors is, and main arterials, in these growth areas, I think is something we need to have a good discussion about.
Right. I think the elected officials need to take more input into the BMPO discussions so that these kind of things are known. We tend to get things from the engineering of what to do, and then rubber stamp it forward, which is appropriate. But there are also this visionary thing that we need to bring through BMPO when we start talking about things connecting county and city development.
Well, then we have data through BMPO too. That we could share, as far as traffic counts and projections for 20, 10, 20, 30 years from now, because when you see that map with the red lines on it, if we don't make some significant changes in the next 20 years, we're going to be gridlocked basically. It's going to be impossible to get around.
Well,
We already have a big number of streets that are at that level.
I think we need to have a broader conversation, and this is something that I know that you guys heard me talk about at BMPO, but one tool that Michelle's been working on is the Greater Idaho Falls Transit. And if we're going to solve problems around congestion, we don't have a full toolbox in Idaho Falls particularly. And then the county, it's a whole nother kind of conversation, right? It's even more difficult. It gets more difficult when you go out into the counties too. But there probably are ways for us that we will have to coordinate with the county for some of these new subdivisions and things as we try to get them into our transit system, because it's not just always going to be a micro transit system if we grow to the numbers you're talking about, right? And the thing that I've been trying to say about BMPO, so that you just, as you make a list about these things, is that we don't think adding lanes and building bigger roads and just building everything to cars is the way that it's going to solve problems, because LA, tried to drive around LA, that's exactly what they did. But really, somehow you've got to find ways to be, you have to have a full toolbox to have the diversity to make things work. And the other reason we really worry about transportation is the talent that we lose from the East Coast who doesn't know how to drive and tries to move to the West. And
we've heard this in the INL over and over again. They're not interested in driving. They're not interested in having cars. They want to bike, walk, or take a bus or public transit. So
yeah, increasingly the 20 to 30-year-olds just have never drove and don't want to drive. They've taken Uber everywhere they need to go.
So we could arrange to have a presentation on multimodal transportation thinking and planning, so that will help you to understand where we're coming from when we talk about, not just cars. Because I'm not anti-car, and to be
And in the West, we're
that way in the West is silly, yeah. But at the same time, we do have to think about not sprawl, right? So, but if that would be a useful thing, would be to have a little bit of a primer on what multimodal is all about. We could.
And then I think we'd be interested in hearing what you need from a transportation system, right? Because I mean, I think largely for you guys, wasn't it largely used for kind of people who needed doctor's appointments and one-offs.
Well, it's the number one issue, certainly on my list for future discussion as we get our microtransit system going, which we're likely to have executed and in place somewhere around March 1st. You'll start seeing transit services here. That's what we're estimating right now. The RFP is in its final stages, and the third-party contractor has to execute services no later than 8 weeks from the time of signing. So March 1st is probably actually a reasonable timeframe. I think that it's very justified for the county to want to experience it for a while, see how it works, look what the numbers are. It'll only be operating within city limits at the beginning, but we obviously hope to have the county as a partner in the future, knowing that the system's gonna have to prove itself, right? We get that.
And so something like that could be put in kind of categories of long-term,
Yeah.
where you work up to, because it's a long-term education.
Right. Well,
And
and
working backwards to some of the other issues which need more immediate, because it would be great, if you can get a good transportation system, but in the meantime, you've got the problems that happened with blocks. This isn't only Idaho Falls, but Hampton. When you have major subdivisions come in that dump a lot of traffic onto the roads, and being able to, you've got to add enough roads to avoid a disaster right now, and that's a challenge.
Or at the very least, make sure the roads are built to the requirements of the amount of traffic that's going to get dumped on it.
That's right.
Well,
That's what I was
49 south,
Yeah.
I live on that area, and it's, I don't know if any of you have driven around there. The amount of building going on is unbelievable. We live in that area, we don't go on 49 south. We ditch out to the other subdivisions, and Crestwood, I think we're gonna make some improvements there to get out on the sunny side, but 49 south, there's supposed to be a bridge built sometime that goes over to Hit Road. Hit Road will need to be expanded at least probably to York Road, because there's just so much building going on there. They're pouring, the cars are pouring out. And as you get growth, we have a real unique problem. And then we've got a river and railroads and canal.
And freeway.
And that makes it real hard and real expensive if you're building a lot of bridges over canals, but so we're not gonna have the perfect system, but the roads that are in place, we're gonna have to look at improving them at least. Turn lanes into subdivisions and.
As you dive down into that, there are things that we could be doing, that we could probably go more in depth. Because having been around here for a little while, there's things that I wish we would have been doing kind of out in the Bonneville area early on, making the developers build the roads when they came through there. We've changed that policy, a lot of that. No, it's not perfect. You can't have them develop. You can go over to Boise, you can see wide roads and narrow down, but it takes the scope of a project down to where we've got to only do this section instead of this section. And so, those are things we're working on, policies. See, that's where the legislative overview thing comes in on what are the policies, and what are we going to be requiring of developers that access county roads versus what you guys require, and having the input. Anyway, without getting into too much detail, see, that'd be a real good topic of conversation, one that I had on the list of ideas on how we can coordinate that better, because that's more the short term.
Does every project, so I was talking to John about Quilly Road, right? And all of the improvements that the county's gonna make to Quilly Road. Does that come through the MPO? Or is it, it's totally independent,
How the
right?
funding mechanism.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what I.
yes and no.
Okay, yeah.
No, because.
Good question.
Because we've been, through ARPA dollars, and a whole bunch of other,
Okay.
and been setting money aside,
Yeah.
knowing that was coming. The difficult thing when you have a school bond passed for a major high school and junior high is, and we probably started working with the high school after we saw the impact, because they didn't have any plans to improve the road. We did get them to make some improvements. But we recognize that there's a bunch of that we're behind. So we've started, for example, Crowley Road,
Mhm.
45th. We've made the developers at least bury the canal, because see that happening in different sections. So when we're ready to build the road, it can be built. We've already got the right of way. If we would have started that quicker on those subdivisions, they would have had the road built out to the half section, unless they're on both sides of it. And, but right now, we've got the money set aside from a combination of reserves that we've been planning for 6 or 7 years that we're working on. You saw the roundabout at First Street. First Street West is some federal funding down to Ammon Road. Ammon's taking care of the next section. And then we're gonna develop Crowley Road to 5 lanes. Between First and Lincoln, 3 lanes. You talk about the corridors in,
Yeah,
3 lanes out to 26 eventually. Same thing with Ammon Road, because we think we can do a quicker fix by minimal right-of-way projection, going to 3 lanes with just using this same road, cutting the edges, widening.
That road's already wider, isn't it?
It's already wider.
It was already wider down at the old high school, yeah. down to Bonneville.
Yeah, that was a sewer project
Yeah.
years ago.
So these aren't federal aid projects, Crowley or Hammond.
That's local dollars.
And that's a problem, the MPO takes so long,
Right.
with the amount of.
That's what we
money
got.
that's happening.
It's 4 or 5 years, just even after it's figured out that it needs to be done.
Once you get on the TIF,
Before
it's
it
5
gets
years.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
To the top of the list. to
Starting
do it.
yeah. Have you guys talked about impact fees, about collecting impact fees, or, because we're kind of in that conversation now?
We have from time to time over the years, but the difficulty is the way the legislature sets that up. It's almost impossible to administer. Because you have to have a formula, and the impact diminishes as you go out, and you have to designate it to. I don't know what the restrictions are on cities. I think they're different. But say, for example, you have a development going up by Thunder Ridge, and the impact is maybe going down to 17th Street on Hill. And so you collect a certain amount of money where you can justify on the traffic studies. And then you have to have that built within either 3 or 5 years. So that dictates where your money, the money that you wouldn't have goes. They're gonna have to change the impact fee.
Rules are for impact fees.
And I don't know what the city's rules are.
Maybe that's an issue, because Mayor Casper, when we were visiting, we talked about joint issues that county and city that we should team up on to influence the legislature to change some of these things so that we have better options.
I think that our delegation would listen to us if we were united on something.
I think they would, and I think there'd be tremendous power in that.
Yeah, I mean, they already give us respectful time, and I imagine when you meet with them, they're respectful of it, but yeah, together it would be something different. I think there's, I have on my mini list for next time that we share, and maybe we do this at the meeting, not put it on a list to do later. But we share each other's legislative agendas from EIC and, well, what is yours?
IAC.
IAC, okay. And we jointly share those that day and talk through some of them that would be useful for each other to know about. Some of them are going to be obscure and only related to something that we don't need to bother each other with, but one of the ones that we're hoping stays under the radar is the, help me, the reserves. The Senator
ability
Guthrie
is-
had wanted to put cap limits on what you could have in reserves. And we're hoping that he's been talked off of that, out of that. And so we've been told to
We get the
gather.
impression that Senator Rice, and I can't remember who he's working with, when I talked to Senator Lind, that they kind of talked him off that
That's
ledge,
what we get,
but
but we have to keep our
Yeah.
ideas fresh in case.
Was
it
that the
comes
one
back.
that Senator Guthrie was? pushing
Guthrie,
for?
That's what-
Yeah.
Elvis Guthrie.
yeah, I
The other thing we'd like
served
to,
with Jim for a long time, but I'll finish that thought, what they may have to do, because working with legislature, sometimes you have to provide them an alternative. And the alternative might be that you have to designate where those reserves and they actually have an accounting system, which as an accountant, I understand that. I used to teach accounting. You having it designated, instead of taking it back. I mean, especially when the state's sitting on how many billions of dollars in the reserve.
Yeah.
So,
They
yeah,
don't have to account for
I
it.
think we rely a lot on Seth. I know you know Seth.
Yeah.
For a great guy. But yeah, we need to kind of talk about issues and as they come up. But
we've talked about notices was the other thing I think those two groups would have in common, that, we're trying to find ways to make the notices more.
Affordable,
Yeah,
for public meetings.
so all the newspaper ads you have to take out, the
Well,
box.
yeah, and
another
perhaps a
piece.
noticing system that would actually allow you to contact a portion of society instead of just those that
Read
go read the.
the legal notices.
Like the
Yeah.
solution that they proposed that even got shut down on that because the
Yeah.
papers have a big, huge lobby.
Yeah.
Not necessarily money wise, but influence wise, because you don't want to read about yourself in the paper, of posting a link. And then having,
All the notes.
the amounts that
Yes.
were
Yeah.
charged to do that, or, but the argument that we heard over there is, then counties and cities will bankrupt our small papers.
Well, yeah,
It's not our job to keep them in business.
Yeah.
It's a really good comeback.
Yep.
Remember that on a regular basis.
They're on their way out.
It's not our fault, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not-
Society is just
Yeah.
But one
Works
thing,
well.
I think, that'll be fairly contemporary again, is the area of impact. I think getting together and kind of putting some kind of general guidelines on what we want, because I know things have changed. I know looking at this, Imagine IF, there's been a lot more talk about infilling, which was a point of contention on the last discussion at the P&Z level.
I thought it was more in the boundaries because infill has been a goal for a
He's
long
talking
time.
about P&Z, not us.
Well, no, that was getting the boundaries because of the amount of space. It wasn't encouraging infilling. But there we're gonna get into the weeds, but I think we need to talk about that because there is a concern on perception, even on comprehensive plans that are put out with planning done outside of the area of impact and outside the city limits causes concerns with county residents. The ag out on the west side, things like that. Just so we have a better understanding. I know 20 years ago, they adopted a comprehensive plan that designated land use, which doesn't have any power of law behind it, all the way down to Bingham County line.
And then the people who come to the public hearings use that map as ammunition when in reality it
It's
isn't.
nothing.
It isn't.
It's a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noticed on this one, that's shrunk down a little, but it still goes outside. And there needs to be a better conversation of ways to delineate that. And because the perception is basically that the city is doing planning for those residents outside that may not ever even become part of the city.
I think this is a really good example of where if we're in constant conversation with each other with regards to issues that involve people in or out of the city limits
Gotta have this.
or the resources that the county is responsible for inside the city limits, if we're part of the conversation up front, then when the nasty phone call from a citizen who doesn't understand things comes, at least we have an understanding of what they're probably actually calling about and know how to talk them down instead of the first thing we hear is the nasty cranky citizen who doesn't understand and we have to say, we'll call you back and then go do the research because we had no idea what they were talking about. But that's just because I'm naive about it.
No. I think the truth is the annexations, I mean, we got fairly aggressive trying to clean up some of the things that we thought the county wanted us to clean up. I mean, that's how it was presented to us. But we were never really having those conversations with you, right? And so, and then we kind of, when the legislature took on those things, we found a good middle ground in our mind. I think, we can help things like, Happy Bills come into the city, we improve, we put parks, and now there's a community farm. So we can find ways
Which I think
forward.
is one of the coolest things that's happened in a long time, because that was one of the dread zones back when I was a police officer. It was like,
I think it's called the Yellowstone Edition.
Yeah,
yeah, and it's just really cool. It's life.
yeah.
under that.
Yeah. So,
Need to be careful about stereotyping these days.
I know.
Yeah,
We've
Well,
been
the
working
Happyville Farm, they named it that. It's interesting.
know.
Yeah,
Duttonville has paid roads now.
yeah.
And that's really cool. And I was talking to somebody the other day and they said they thought Duttonville was a slang term for this neighborhood. It's like, no, the farmer that owned that was Dutton.
Yeah, I don't think anybody involved in
It's like-
the garden naming they didn't do any research. They
No,
thought it was a very positive
Happy
sounding
Lemon.
name. I don't think it
Yeah.
was,
That was Happy Lemon.
yeah.
Well, for whatever
can't say.
connotations you may be speaking of, it was named Happyville because the gentleman with
Yeah,
the last
that's-
name Happy lived there, right?
Right,
So
that's
it's-
first.
Yeah.
But
It was a
But when
nickname
I
of
was
Happy
going
Lemon.
there and it was the
Yeah.
drive-by shooting neighborhood,
Mm.
I had no idea why it was called that. I didn't know why Duttonville was called Duttonville.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
learn the history of our city in those areas, and I've got friends that live in both those areas, and it's like, it's just neat that they're,
But when it comes to comp planning is visioning and those are hopes and aspirations. And it really is the area of impact where we need to be in contact with each other and to make sure that we're, because the comp plan is a tool used in area of impact conversation. And so it's the area of impact conversation that we need to focus on. And as far as any, I don't know, differences in vision between what, say, Ammon's comp plan and the county's comp plan and the city's comp plan, that's okay. That's okay. That's no different than three people having different plans and goals for their lives. And then, they might clash and be different and everything will be fine because the real stuff happens, in with the area of impact. So
I think
hopefully
what we
we'll be
can
able
do-
to educate each other and citizens well enough that we can not have to sweat that and really focus on the area where we
But
come
when you
together.
publish that, it becomes reality to other people. Especially.
They'd only read the preface where it says, right?
I know,
that it's
but they won't.
not binding.
See, 20 years ago, we weren't aware of the comp plan designations that went clear to the county road till we read it in the paper. And I know that predates a lot of your time there.
But we signed some agreement, the city and county signed an agreement in 2001.
That's
That
area
was
of the impact. But the comp plan, you're talking about, it doesn't really matter if we all designate differently. I think that needs to be coordinated, especially on the perimeters. Because you've got a farmer out on the west side who has neighbors that sees that that's been designated for a certain designation that the county really isn't aware of until they see it published, and then those neighbors call.
Yeah, I got a lot of calls on that, and I would like to see, and why it is helpful to reach across, even though it's kind of your own vision, is I would like to see much more emphasis put on the part of the statute that says to preserve, and you and I've had this conversation, prime agricultural ground. I mean, that's part of the statute, but when I read through the comp plan, it kind of falls away and gets lost. And this county is full of prime ag land. It's also full of less than prime ag ground where it makes sense, to grow into those gravel shells or places where water is limited.
Bryon, are you talking about the old comp plan or the draft of the new one?
The new one.
The draft.
The new one. But I'm not I'm not here to criticize it whatsoever. I compliment Brad for pulling it back from that first version that was put out that did go clear out into that really prime ag ground. I mean, he pulled it back. But I just think it's important to remember that's part of the statute is to, in this land use planning, is to preserve prime ag ground. And we can't lose vision of that here in Bonneville County, in my opinion.
I don't want to, but I do think we all need to get clear, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect on this, because I'm not a planner, but we need to get, make sure that we have really good working operational definitions of what each tool is used for, because there's a separate set of the statute or the local land use planning act that covers comprehensive planning, separate, section that covers area of impact, et cetera. And so we want to just make sure that we're not, here's the thing, when you do your comp planning, you're asking your citizens what they think about the future and what services they would like. Nobody has a crystal ball. This is all just, again, that aspirational touchy-feely stuff. And so if I were getting a call from someone who didn't like it, I would say, well, either you should have participated, but this is what your colleague, this is what your neighbors and people around you thought. Or if they were the county, I would say, this is just what county or what city residents are thinking it when they start thinking about growth and what they'd like to grow into. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, right? And so I think we need to not put too much emphasis on it.
And they get mad because they didn't see the notice because it was only in the newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
Just a quick question on this.
Yeah.
Did any, just because I was doing some research, did any of our
It's like
city
the
staff
seasons
reach out
right now.
and
I'm
try to
after
present you
chocolates.
a meeting or a
Saved
conversation
those
about
for
Mass
Yes, so
We had
Probably.
two staff members that in planning and zoning.
No.
Brad did reach out and wanted us to attend some of those, but difference of opinion with our legal counsel that there was an ongoing lawsuit that had to do with development and growth, which you're aware of.
So you guys felt like you couldn't attend the
Well,
Imagine IF meetings as a result?
We couldn't, but staff members and Austin and Michelle, Brad sent them out a list of the meetings that they thought they needed to attend. All the input, he said, you don't need to come to those. We're just gathering information. We'll get a report. Well, they give a report, call it draft, send over and want the input back. So we got the Planning and Zoning Commission who's waiting for a final report. And we had this conversation. The final report was being modified after it went to your planning zone. It probably, as far as, seeing this would be a good discussion to have as far as outlining process. Because the input at a comprehensive plan needs to go through our planning and zoning commission before it comes to us also. But they need to be reviewing something besides a draft, kind of pass it, then you can read it, find out what's in it. It works better to see the final. And I think that's been taken care of because planning and zoning has them on. They were kind of sitting here, lack of communication, not knowing that they need to send it back until after they got the final. I think that's been set up to go through that so they understand it. Because when you tell citizens that, oh, this is just a planning document, and it's a concept and what aspirational, the problem with that is then they come to us or, Bryon has his neighbors come, and then it kind of sets us up in an adversarial role with you guys. Because, well, that's not our plan. The city just went ahead and did that. I think it's better if we can find a way to work together with that. Because that's what the resident hears out there. And we have to say, well, that's the city's aspiration of this, that's not ours. Well, why can't you guys work together? And it creates that defensive, it puts us in a defensive posture, which I'd rather not end up in.
Well, and I think we're all ready to not hear. We're not working.
Well, and I
together.
think ultimately it puts the citizenry in the defensive mode, which I know ultimately costs the city a lot more money on Sunnyside than it would have if, because when people get angry, then their property is worth more.
Well, let's be honest. the
And you
more-
had the historical society that said those trees.
Oh, those trees were probably endangered species too, and you're lucky there wasn't a red-tailed hawk nesting in them, because we'd still be waiting.
I just think it saves everyone money, taxpayers, and time and effort for everyone when we do communicate.
Well, I do, and I think that's what we are supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
We're supposed to be doing what's right for all those people.
so this is super encouraging. What's going
Yeah,
on.
correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like some of the ag land, the kids aren't necessarily wanting to be farmers. And when dad dies, they inherit the land and then they go, wow, this land is worth a lot of money. And the developer contacts them and pretty soon a lot of money's been paid. I mean, look at by Community Park. That land sold for, what was it?
$5 a square foot.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Well,
It's not ag land.
Grandpa didn't want it
$20,000
sold
an
as a-
acre, but I mean,
as a
that's what
housing
happens.
addition.
And
He
then you
wanted
get
it kept
into
as a farm. So
property
it's-
rights. You mean you're not gonna allow me to do what I want with my property and?
But it's too general to say that that's happening across the board.
Oh,
because
I
I
agree
can
with
assure
that.
you that there are a lot of next generation young people that do want to preserve that ground and continue it
Oh,
on.
for sure.
They over there by
It's probably
Community
a
Park,
mix.
that was an example of less than prime farm ground. That frankly, farm ground loses its viability when it becomes surrounded by development.
Well, that's probably true.
Because you just can't go in and farm it anymore. You get too many complaints about the dust and the noise at 2 a.m. And so that's why it's important
Yeah,
to
if you're using
preserve
fertilizer
a
from the
block
feedlot.
of area
Yeah.
that doesn't have development encroach close.
And I would say that we should add to this that not only should we preserve it for those families and for the people who want that lifestyle, but we're seeing 2 rendering plants come in for beef in Buffalo. Because when they went all regional and then, we had these massive rendering plants that were not local, we ran into real problems. And let's just look at COVID and how small the world got sometimes. But if we don't grow our own
Really
food,
nice
it's
to have
almost like the
ability to-
microgrid for electric, we need to have enough, it would be nice. The more we can grow local, buy local, have that be a closed loop as much as we can.
Process.
We're never gonna be completely there, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, there is a need for us to think about farmlands. I mean, the ancient cities, when I study cities, it was, the farmland was core to what those cities were about.
I think that you're getting real happy on us here
Mhm.
and all touchy-feely about your good vibes about, local produce, but the prime land that I'm thinking about is the prime barley, the incredible seed potatoes, the incredible things that are part of the international economy that Idaho produces large scale. And that we need to do our best to make sure doesn't somehow become more attractive as a housing development than as this incredible contribution to Idaho's economy that it makes. So I'm thinking,
Both things should be true.
the other opposite end of the spectrum. But
Absolutely true. Yeah, I mean, ag is still one of the largest employers. It's
Yeah.
one of the biggest
It's a-
drivers
it's
for
our economy.
even local. Even the amount that comes to City of Idaho Falls businesses through local, the Anheuser-Busch, the InBev,
Mhm.
that employs all these people. Yeah, so it's an important part of the economy.
I mean, sun, rain, that's amazing what they
Yeah.
do. I mean, they're just some really important things.
absolutely.
Well, Commissioner, it's good to just have this kind of, this topic be put in front of us because our constituents, this is where you really see the divide, right? Because
Right.
nobody's calling us saying, please preserve ag land. That's not happening. It is, what can you convert to residential? Period, end of story. Or where can I get my Red Lobster built? I mean, they're just not coming to us, right, with these same levels. So this is super important to just be able to have that conversation and again, almost just put it in front of my face. Because that's really where you see the divide, I think, in our constituency, especially since you're a farmer, they're gonna call you, right?
Well, they do.
You're gonna call you.
And I certainly understand that it is going to grow, and there is going to be land eaten up. But it goes back to that statute, preserve the prime ag land,
The prime.
preserve the areas where farmers can continue to make a really good living to where they don't care about selling it for development.
Right.
Because they're doing fine the way they are. They want to pass that on. There are areas, plenty of areas, where it's marginal to farm. Those are the areas that need to develop.
Well, and we don't have a statute on this one, but anything we can do to protect assets, the riverfront, for example, and not have that all become industrial just because it used to be a gravel pit or something. There are things we
Or
can
we
do
used to
to
dump our industrial waste right in
improve
the
the
river, so we
values,
wanted it close to the river.
improve the view shed, do those things. That's something that we're interested in.
Or
Yeah,
I think the other thing we think about with that is corridors. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to add to that, that I think we had to look at some joint funding or management of part of our park system. We've talked about it in a couple of parks area, but
Connecting our
you
community.
have to remember that our parks are used by the whole region. It's not just city people that come to them. So
And tourists.
the expectation that like Noise Park is going to be totally funded by the city is not actually clicking well, and those kinds of things. We need to really think about that.
Shouldn't that be private? I mean, it seems like that's a
Or-
good
well,
example of
this is
government
just-
getting out.
I
of
think
the
all
way.
six of
Something to
us
put
might
on
have a
the-
different
the
idea.
List of things to
But-
go forward.
But it
with.
was interesting because when you asked the individuals, and there was, 60-ish of these individuals, they were almost exclusively county residents. And the reason why is, I live out by you. I'm not driving to Noyes Park for recreation, right? It's not convenient for me to do that. So it was primarily county residents. In fact, the one list I saw was almost exclusively county residents who
Using
wanted that.
Noise Park.
Yeah, and that wanted us to invest it and develop it for their particular
I
user group.
understand that, but if I would envision the way that would develop, it would be through private.
Right.
I think that's a good example of-
I think we need to do what we did with the stock car association, so
But there's
sign a
also-
contract with a private organization, so I'm with
Also
you.
an
but
option there where the state gets some funds from the
Yes.
UTD licenses. and
There's a
ATVs.
whole,
That might be a much better conversation, just give it, because
Absolutely.
they have a revenue source to kind of run that.
Mm, yeah.
So that
Yeah.
might be even better than
Yeah.
private, because private's awesome if someone's willing to take the risk.
I don't know what the terms were when it was donated to the city. We have to
Yeah,
look
and
at
all of
as
that has to.
yeah, there's a certain level of
The
recreation we
BLMs,
have to.
It
they're
was-
already there.
This is not prime
Yeah.
ag ground.
Yeah.
So-
But no, For Francis, I think it's just a good reminder that county
Yeah.
is using recreation.
Well, it's like
and
when we
they-
talk about search and rescue,
Yeah.
if 70% or whatever, or 60% are city, but then we don't want to count the number of county people that come into our parks and go, oh, okay. Because
Well, we saw the number on libraries.
something
and
we
I-
should be
and I
thinking
assume
about.
that
I'll
it's-
quit using it, I
Yeah.
promise.
Okay.
Well, I said, you look at the
Good.
number on library usage. I
Yeah,
mean, you
yeah.
have to think it's kind of be somewhat akin to that.
Right, so, and I don't mean we'll solve it today, but it's just something to think about for the future is where do we have opportunities to work together to finance these parks that are really for everybody in the region?
Well, and also I think the trail systems, there's so much opportunity for tourism. Like if we could really build the trails into Bingham and all through the county, out to Taylor Mountain, all those kind of things, all of that for mountain biking. You look at Grand Junction, Colorado and what they built, people from all over the world come to those trails. And there's a lot of opportunities, and it doesn't have to cost a lot because many of those are dirt trails. They're not paved.
Well, at a minimum, just preserving the right of way.
Yeah,
when
so
we
we can do
can
that.
for all of the connecting our communities and maybe expanding that vision.
State lands.
Amen.
protecting it.
We talked
Because
about
it is a
urban-
bigger picture, sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
How many of you know what the Caribou Trail is? It's a cooperative effort between some counties in Idaho and Wyoming. It's a
Yep.
250-mile trail that's now complete. And their long-range plan is to connect that to the Fall Creek trails and then across the river and eventually all the way to Yellowstone. I mean, they have an incredibly robust thought process, but they have finished the first 250 miles with right-of-ways and crossings and cattle guards. So you can get across the state lands and fences. And
You'll
they had
remember-
more use this year from e-bikes
Yeah.
than from four-wheelers.
So you're gonna keep going.
So,
Governor Kempthorne wanted to put in one more state park, and they had auditions, and a commission came around and held hearings, and one of the options, my favorite one, which didn't make it, was to put in a trail from, I don't know where exactly, I'm picturing Blackfoot, but it could have been further south, all the way to Yellowstone
Yeah.
or West Yellowstone, and that would have connected a lot. But the Hiawatha, I know, I can name 10 people who went there last year,
Yeah.
but I can't name anybody.
Trail of
who
Coeur d'Alene.
stayed here.
Well, and as the e-bikes become more popular, we're gonna have more
I see some signals of
Tom
diversion.
and I.
We have a
have
meeting
meeting
at
at
1:30.
the 1:30
Just
at
wanted
the
to point
fire
out
department.
Oh, it's already
things
at
on
the-
which you brought up, you know, Sunnyside corridor.
Yeah.
Was a lot of work. That was a joint project when you were bringing up the idea. To be around when that was put together. Commissioner Sherlock kind of organized it, splitting the cost between county, city and Hammond City. You know, that those types of things can be put
Roger,
together.
toss out a few other joint, because you were around for the fueling station.
Right.
That's another joint effort. too.
And there's other issues like GIS that we all use, same services. But on the ag, you know, the prime, I think the purpose for preserving ag ground, that's comprehensive plan was adopted way back when, almost when Clyde, I think Clyde was still in office. And it was to preserve and is set up so there's certain density requirements. But a lot of these need to be discussed in the terms of what are the guidelines to give to the planning commissions for an area of impact, for example. Because the idea is not to, you know, and I need to dig in a little more to the ImagineIF, you know, the idea of these great little communities where you can walk, shop, everything together is great. But if you're putting one of those 6 miles outside of town, you've got 5 miles of road between that are still in the county that has the impact. You know, that's the idea, you know, the area of impact and infilling in that, you know. But that could be a talk, you know, because I know there are certain people out there who love to develop property.
Well, that's kind of the question that I was wondering about Crowley coming through BMPO, because I wasn't sure if that was the route that the county was always taking, or whether, but now I know, like, no, you've identified certain problem areas.
That was 10 years ago to be a loop, but never happened.
And it's on the BMPO plan as an arterial.
Yeah,
it's on
yeah,
arterial,
yeah, right.
And Hammond is not.
But
And it is.
But we've also
So-
been requiring right away when people develop. So we have started
Yeah.
preserving those.
Yeah.
You don't have to go back and buy it later.
Yeah, but you know, you've got certain areas and you talk about people who have property rights and something that were zoned back when I owned Bonneville and was put together with City of Idaho Falls as a sewer system. And the area that was designated. That's been the biggest frustration for me growing up in that Iona area, to watch that fill in. But you've got a service area that was designated for many years that people have a right to develop in. That's causing that input or impact.
Yeah.
That's where I think if you look at an area of impact agreement, so that somebody, you know, I came quite a bit after Clyde did, but somebody who comes that far after me, I would like them to say, man, why did they leave us with all this type of problem? And part of that is growing out, taking up all the ag ground. You know, some of us are farmers anyway.
Well, because so I would just say the one issue that I do, that I see, but it's just from this perspective of driving, is you've got a piece of farm ground, right? And it's the homestead, and then they sell the back 40, and then the back 40 gets developed, but the homestead never gets annexed. And so now you don't have road improvements for all of those hundreds of houses behind, because you don't have the frontage.
But see, there's also annexation policies that we would love to talk about on the way it's developed.
Yeah.
That develops back in there, but doesn't require the developer, because he does that last. You know, those are something, if we're prepared, we can come up with a list of topics, you know, for different projects where we can prepare ourselves with a PowerPoint with examples both ways, so that we can understand, you know, why those actions are taken. You can understand the frustration it causes. That's what I hope we can get to.
Because that's what I just see a lot, is that we're
Well,
never gonna
this-
get the frontage.
It's a whole different world now than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And it's going to require that we take a look at the plan for the whole county and how, instead of with the way things have always been done, so that they're done, so that transportation comes in along corridors and we don't have subdivisions in the middle of nowhere. I have a city resident who calls me every week and says, you need to do everything you can to protect Antelope Flats. So we don't have any houses built up there. It's like, okay,
luck.
working on it.
You have
you
to
know?
buy it, that means you have to buy it, so that you put it
I
in.
talk to the farmers that live up there every day.
Well, in a year and a half, we've got 600 acres up there that's for sale inside of the CRP. Up Birch Creek,
Which fun,
and that loops all the way over there.
yes.
So this is not for discussion, this is just
What is it,
FYI.
Foster's, you're on,
This would take care.
I know, well, I'll see you over at the chief's office.
Yeah.